Right.
Okay, and we are live. So a bonus for me this week, I get to talk to Adam. And I can't believe we were just saying the year has hardly begun and there's so much to talk about already. So I'm going to stick on the courts, I think, because that's what you and I usually talk about. So shall I kick off with the breaking news in my world, the Luigi Mangione universe? So I was surprised to see that the federal judge in this case, Margaret Garnett, having said on Friday when we were all in court that she was not inclined to have an evidentiary hearing, in other words, a pre-trial hearing, which is what the defense wants, because their argument is that the police in Altoona, Pennsylvania, didn't have a warrant to search Luigi Mangione's backpack, and therefore that the evidence in it, which was the gun, and which also was a journal outlining possible motive, the defense is saying that should be chucked out because it was about 6 feet away from him when the police started to go through it, and there was a wall of police between him and it. Furthermore, he was cuffed and on his way out of the McDonald's. So their argument is, in those circumstances, they needed a warrant to go through that backpack. And so the judge on Friday said that unlike the state case against him, where, there were 3 weeks of hearings over this, and the judge isn't going to rule until May, the federal judge, and remember it's the federal case where the death penalty is on the line, said Friday, I don't think I'll need one. Today, she has sent a short note saying, actually, given the gravity of the case, I do want one, but I want a quick one. And she said, I want one witness who is going to tell me what the procedural guidelines for the Altoona PD actually says. Because again, there's some dispute about this between the government and the defense. So she wants one witness, and she's even said it doesn't have to be one of the arresting officers, but she just wants somebody to come and say what the procedure is in Altoona. And she's asked the government and the defense to get the witness in court in some date in the next 2 weeks. And she had already set a court date for January the 30th. And I think they're trying to set a trial date. And the reason that I was surprised about this, Adam, is because there's been a sort of back and forth between the state and the feds all along in this case. Karen Anifilo Friedman, Luigi's main defense lawyer, said right at the outset that she was on her way. This is the cops, it's the NYPD who arrested him. That she was on her way to state court, and I think she suddenly got yanked in and told, no, you need to go to federal court, and it was a surprise to her. But I think in the court papers, we've seen that the defense argued to have the feds, they want the feds to go first. But the judge had said, it had been ruled that actually state would go first. But what we learned on Friday is it seems that the feds are going to go first. And I believe the reason that this will be good news for the defense is that if the feds go first, then Luigi Mangione, the rules of double jeopardy apply. He can't be tried twice for the same thing. But for some reason, the judge explained this to me before Christmas, if the state was to go first, double jeopardy doesn't apply. So anyway, there's a lot to unpack there. And on a selfish note, there was a lot of talk on Friday in the court about how, depending on whether the other thing the judge is ruling on is whether or not to keep the death penalty on the table. And that is not really to do with anything specific to the case. It's to do with interpretations of the law. And so we sat through some really quite difficult to follow arguments on Friday about whether or not stalking, which is one of the federal charges, rises to the severity that you could appropriately have the death penalty. So in other words, they're trying to get counts 3 and 4 chucked out. And I think, the argument went above the head of most people listening in the courtroom. And the defense had to get a special lawyer in from Maryland, ironically, because that's where Luigi Mangione is from, to argue that. But the judge then said, so if it's not going to be a capital case, if she decides it's not going to be a capital case, then we could have a trial as early as October. Jury selection could start as early as July. And if they keep the death penalty in, then we're looking at December or January. And of course, for me, I remembered how Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal trial, on which the jury finally came to a verdict on December the 29th, came right in the middle of everyone's Christmas break. But there you are.
Right.
Just it happens all through the year.
We were both in court for that. And here's another, for folks who are just tuning in now, we have been talking about the case of Luigi Mangione. And I actually have a question for you, Vicky, because you've been following this much more closely than I am. You're writing a book on this. I read the minute order by the judge who, as you note, kind of changed her mind this morning. I'm reading the minute order. I have it printed out. On reflection, and considering the arguments made by counsel at the January 9th conference and the seriousness of the charges the defendant is facing, the court hereby orders the government to produce for a hearing an officer of Altoona Police Department with sufficient authority and experience to testify about the established or standard procedures in use by the department in December 2024 for securing, safeguarding, and, if applicable, inventorying the personal property of a person arrested in a public place. Because the inquiry will be focused on department procedures, the witness need not have had any personal involvement in Mangione's arrest. Given the very limited subject matter, the court expects a hearing to be brief. So it's going to happen within the next 2 weeks. The kind of remarkable on reflection, saying, forget about what I just said on Friday. I thought it over. This is a death penalty case. And we're going to have this evidentiary issue, but it's not going to be a weeks long mini trial.
3 weeks, which is what the States was.
Yeah.
We heard from every single cop pretty much who arrived at that McDonald's. And then we heard from everyone who went through Luigi Mangione's stuff in the police station. And again, that's why she wants the inventory procedure read out, because the defense again is arguing that they went through his stuff in the police station incorrectly. And they're arguing that the rules say very clearly you have to do it in front of the person whose belongings it is. And I think they're also arguing that one of the cops started to read the contents of the journal. And again, that's so the defense will argue no, they're not supposed to do that. They're just supposed to document what's there.
Right.
So we'll see. But she did say this judge is very interesting. much different in demeanor from the state judge, Gregory Caro, who's much older and who has, I would say, a much less firm grip on the courtroom. He's a soft-spoken guy, and it seems, I mean, the very fact that he let all these evidentiary hearings roll on. I mean, I think even the defense was surprised by that.
Mm.
And this Margaret Garnett is, you know, youngish, probably in her 40s, and and she speaks very deliberately, and she did reserve the right on Friday. She said, "I may change my mind. As of now, I don't think we need it. Doesn't matter what state did, but I may change my mind." And so I guess here she's changed her mind.
Right. So what do you think changed her mind about it? Is this, I mean, you saw the evidentiary hearing in the state court. Do you think that because it's just, as she says, the seriousness of the charges, that it's a death penalty case, is this her crossing her T's, dotting her I's?
Yeah.
And so it's not something about the nature of, because you saw the evidence that came in. She says, I just need one witness, and it doesn't need to be the one who arrested Mangione. But this is just caution, you interpret this as?
I think it's partly caution because, as you know, Adam, when you've got a case of this magnitude and this high profile, you don't want to make a mistake and have
Right.
a reason for mistrial or whatever. And I also think, I mean, there is a legitimate disagreement between the government and the defense on what the Altoona police procedure actually is. Because I think there's a different procedure in their training booklet. It's slightly different from the sort of the guiding principle one. And so I think this is her way of trying to clear this up. I mean, I will say that, sitting through all the evidence in the state case, I mean, it seemed that the Altoona cops definitely were very gung-ho when they arrested Luigi Mangione. They were very gung-ho. They didn't, and there was debate even among them inside the McDonald's. One of them said, "Don't we need a search warrant?" Now, when they were on the stand, they said, no, it's search incident to arrest. We didn't need a warrant. But the problem with that is that the backpack wasn't in his possession. Now, I know there are people who'll make the argument about inevitability. There is that if eventually the contents of the backpack would have come into police custody anyway, that is a thing that a judge can rule on. But, it seemed, I think, clear to a lot of us that, definitely the Altoona police were very excited to have the most wanted criminal in the country at that moment in the middle of their McDonald's.
I imagine any kind of police officer would be, given the profile and
right.
nature.
Right.
So do we know at all when Judge Caro is planning to rule on his evidentiary? May, okay.
May.
So we
that's
could
why.
we could get a ruling from Judge Garnett in federal court before then.
Yeah, much before. And that's why I was so interested that both the government and the defense raised the question of setting the trial date, because the Caro is going at a snail's pace comparatively. And so, I mean, in a way, they just, possibly, it seemed to me they almost ambushed the state and said, right, we're moving quicker.
Right.
Now, whether that is to Luigi Mangione's advantage or not, well, I think going back to this issue of double jeopardy, it possibly is. But I think I've said to you before, Adam, that, this case is, stirs up complicated emotions in so many people because of the very flawed healthcare system that we have in this country. And I do think that jury selection is going to be critical because I think this is going to be a trial where many people will try to get on that jury who've suffered. And, we all know people who have suffered at the hands of their health insurer, who've had claims denied, and possibly lost loved ones, suffered themselves, who knows? And so I think jury selection is almost going to be the most critical part of what's to come.
That's such a good point. I mean, voir dire will be a very interesting process. And I'm sure some of the folks, very often in federal trials, we've sat through a number of them. There's a questionnaire and there'll be questions like that. And we'll find out, we'll hear some of those stories and whether a juror discloses, yeah, I lost my loved one, I lost my friend. And whether, a judge will ask at that moment, do you think you can be fair and impartial? And what the answer is, whether they remain on the jury. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. No, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. I mean, the other thing that Margaret Garnett said at the outset of the hearing, I mean, she gave a admonition to the court that there was to be, no emoting in her courtroom.
Right.
And again, that's because, Luigi Mangione has a ton of supporters and I was amazed.
Yeah.
It was really cold in December. They had their tents pitched across from the courtroom. And, there was a loyal group of them that didn't flag. I thought, God, by day 2, they're going to have had enough of this. No. They're very, very organized. I will say that. Very highly organized and very pleasant, I will say. I mean, it wasn't a case of people who couldn't control themselves. Not at all.
Right. And well, I mean, we talked about it last time when Luigi Mangione had the terrorism charges in state court thrown out. There were people who cheered.
Then there was emotion.
Yeah, in court, and the court officers quieted them down. But we talked about this last time. For folks who didn't see it, who are watching now, it was 15 stories up in Manhattan Criminal Court, and you could hear
is it on 15 or is it on 13? I'm now getting on federal. It's 1.
Right. I think the courtrooms changed at one point.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the arraignment. And during the arraignment, it just went up, whether it's 15 or 13, just a wall of sound, a wall of cheers from outside the courtroom at the guy who's accused of murder. And there's a large contingent, large crowds outside. So for folks, I see someone asking, yes, the federal case is a death penalty case. That is what
at the moment, and that's exactly the question of whether the death penalty stays on the table is the question that the judge, Margaret Garnett, is mulling right now.
Right. And I think one of the grounds on which Mangione's lawyers are trying to get it off the table is pretrial statements by the government. Isn't that right? Has that been resolved in any way that No. So they haven't decided that pretrial prejudice, that prejudicing the jury?
No, at the moment, all that was talked about on Friday were counts 3 and 4, which are the stalking. Because again, it's not so simple. The state case is a murder charge, essentially. I mean, there are, other charges. But federal, as it's more complicated. It's to do with intent and crossing state lines. I mean, that's how they bring intent to have a firearm and So these are the charges. The idea that the allegation that he stalked Brian Thompson across state lines, and the argument really is whether or not in the law at the moment, and this is a very technical argument that's being argued right now, is whether or not you can apply the death penalty to basically a stalking charge.
Well, the stalking charges, there are a number of them, but my understanding, correct me if I'm mistaken, I haven't followed this case as closely as you. With the stalking charge, the defense's argument is, if the victim isn't aware that he's being
Yeah.
stalked, you have the fact that Brian Thompson was shot in the back of the head. If he doesn't know and never finds out a man is stalking him until the moment that he's dead, through the moment that he's dead, as a
Can you apply exactly?
Right.
Can you apply stalking charge?
Right. But that's not, as I understand it, the top charge. There are other charges that are that have potential death penalty application. Is there so? But there's been so much. It's been a news maelstrom. Just today, you had Senator Mark Kelly has just sued Pete Hegseth over the letter of censure from Pete Hegseth. We have Jerome Powell announcing in last night in a video that he's under.
That was amazing.
The blatantness, that even this morning we're already seeing two Republican senators breaking ranks. You had Tom Tillis immediately say that he's not going to confirm anybody for the Fed until this is resolved, and that this, he and Lisa Murkowski essentially saying that this looks like open corruption by Trump's Justice Department, which, had it come from the other side of the aisle, had it come from any legal observer, or, I might say anyone with eyes, is a pretty, it's an extraordinary statement coming from Republican senators to say that, just knowing what's at stake, Fed independence, the fact that that there is a Supreme Court hearing next week on Lisa Cook, and Trump trying to compromise Federal Reserve independence. It looks like at least a couple of Senate Republicans have had enough.
Yeah. Well, did I read somewhere? Trump has come out and said he didn't know anything about the Justice Department's investigation of Jerome Powell. I find that very difficult to believe. The chair of the Federal Reserve is being investigated, and subpoenas flying, and Trump doesn't know.
Right. Oh, I mean, the only thing that separates us in my mind from the Comey and Letitia James investigation is that his DMs to Bondi didn't go public, right? And here we have reporting from Bloomberg saying that this is a Bill Pulte special, that Pulte was the one who brought this forward, which is odd because what does the Federal Housing Agency have anything to do with an investigation into whether Jerome Powell allegedly misled Congress over this?
Interest rates.
Right.
Mortgages, interest rates.
Right.
Because that's why Trump is ticked, right? Because he thought that he wanted Jerome Powell to lower interest rates more quickly, right?
Oh, absolutely. But that's, that's not the pretextual reason. That's not the reason that the government is trying to sell here. And you also have the fact that this is, criminal referral by the MAGA Congresswoman Representative Anna Luisa Luna, and that I'm sorry, I think I got her name wrong, Representative Luna. But this is the fact that we're just seeing that pattern repeat, where we have Bill Pulte, the same one who went after Letitia James, the fact that this is coming from Janine Pirot's office, the same office that keeps getting no true billed by grand juries. I mean, we'll see if they try to do anything with it. And if they do try to do anything with this, if it goes the way of the sandwich thrower, there's a history here. And it's incredible that it's gotten to the point where the Department of Justice's credibility has been so shot that even his own party is openly saying this is a corruption of the Department of Justice.
I know. I mean, yeah, I know. Well, let us hope it goes the way of the ham sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Mark Kelly. Have you read his lawsuit?
Yes, I have. So, he makes a point that what he said in the video, for folks who missed last year when this was all going down, he was one of 6 Democratic senators who released a video saying that members of the military and the intelligence community do not have to follow illegal orders. And the lawsuit points out that that's black letter law. That's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's basically a First Amendment lawsuit, and it can progress really, really quickly. His attorney has asked for a ruling that would overturn the censure letter and to block any other investigative steps for a criminal proceeding or an administrative proceeding by Friday. And so this lawsuit wants to stop all of that in its tracks before the end of the week. I wouldn't be surprised if the judge who's been assigned to the case, Judge Richard Leon, who's a George W. Bush appointee, set a hearing in the case very soon. We could see this coming to a head very, very quickly. So,
what jurisdiction is Judge Leon, Adam?
He's the District of Columbia. So this is happening right in Washington, D.C. I imagine there's going to be a ton of attention on this. There's another thing happening in the District of D.C. coming to a head, especially with everything surrounding Renee Nicole Good. And that's Representative Joe Negus's lawsuit with a number of other Democratic senators against Kristi Noem. Now, folks might have seen this past weekend, you had a lot of Democratic lawmakers try to visit ICE facilities. I believe that Ilhan Omar was among one of the contingents, and they were denied entrance, which is significant because last month, like 3 weeks ago, a federal judge said that DHS, Department of Homeland Security, must let lawmakers inspect these facilities. And right after Renee Good was shot to death, Kristi Noem goes right back and reinstates a policy requiring a week of advance notice, 7 days advance notice, in order to have congressional visitation. 3 weeks after a judge said you can't do that. And the kind of the legal justification that they're claiming for this is that under the crux of the ruling was that there was a congressionally mandated the appropriations bill that funds these detention centers is crystal clear in the statute that they cannot stop these congressional visitations. They cannot impose certain restrictions. But Kristi Noem's argument is that they're using the massive Trump appropriations bill for that, and they're going to set it aside. So she basically argued, we're going to do the same thing under a different legal justification. But just today, and this is going to come to a head very soon, it's going to come to a head on Wednesday, Representative Negus of Colorado had said that filed a motion for an order to show cause that the judge's ruling had been violated, and said that there is no way that the so-called big beautiful bill money is the only source, that the government needs to provide evidence that all of these visitations are only from that pool of money. And if not, the government should be found in violation of the December order. So that's happening on Wednesday. And it's going to be the first big legal battle, potentially. I mean, who knows with the news cycle these days, coming to a head about ICE in the wake of the agent shooting Renee Good to death.
So just so I understand, Adam, so the judge who said congressional visitations must be allowed
Yes.
issued what sounds to me like a very simple ruling.
Yeah.
And Christy, so how the heck do we get from that to appropriations?
Right. So the crux of the ruling was that the government was defying the mandates of Congress because the Congressional Appropriations Bill, I think it was Section 527 or something like that, had mandated no restrictions on when a member of Congress is going to visit a facility to perform oversight
Right.
duties, that can't be interfered with.
It's
Under
in the
that,
purview because Congress being the purse that's paying for all this.
exactly,
Right. Or
and it's
sanctioning.
under
Yeah. We're
and
paying
that
the taxpayer. Yeah.
if the taxpayer money is going to these ICE facilities under these statutes, they come with these restrictions. And one of those restrictions is you can't limit congressional visitation. But the big ugly bill or beautiful bill, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't have the same limitations. So Christine, but the thing is, the judge's December ruling went into that and said that there wasn't evidence that the Trump appropriations bill was that segregated out from the rest of the money. So we could see a judge that could be pretty furious about a ruling being ignored, and that's coming to a head on Wednesday.
Right. Obviously, I have little confidence that whatever ruling is made will actually have any impact. I must say that the scenes from Minneapolis I have found I can't get them out of my head.
Right.
It seems, I mean, that feels like it's a watershed moment. It's a tipping point. And, we
Right.
see
I mean,
what.
if I can I know they're very, very different stories, and one of them is a woman who's dead. But if I can connect that with the Powell story, we're told to not believe our eyes and to, when Trump goes in front of the camera and says, "Oh, I have nothing to do with this Powell decision," the fact that we are supposed to believe that. And when I look at all the videos, one of the things that was very striking to me is how quickly and appropriately the New York Times and the Washington Post and other news outlets said flat out, yes, she was trying to avoid him, because that's very clear in the video. Correct? I mean, like, you can see her.
Oh, geez, you don't accidentally turn a wheel.
Exactly.
There was a wheel turn. Yes, there
Right.
was. I mean, otherwise, but I mean, it's sort of like self-evident. Why otherwise, if she hadn't turned the wheel, the car would have hit him.
Right. Right. And so it's this sort of thing where the newsrooms appropriately throughout this, well, the administration says this, they gave headlines that the videos contradict the government's account. That was the New York Times headline. The headline of the Wall Street Journal, that the car veered off away from the agent. And these are, there are people who have been critical of New York Times and Wall Street Journal headlines. Everyone who's watching this right now can be pretty confident that there were long editorial decisions over the nature and character of those headlines. They wanted to see, is it justified to say, as a matter of fact, on the news side, not the opinion side, that these videos contradict what the administration was saying? And people said, yeah, we can believe our eyes, that the videos show what they show, and they're not the footage isn't contradictory in any way. I mean, it's caused a lot of online debate on social media, but some things are very clear about it. We can see Renee Good turning the wheel. We can see the car turning out of the way. And, we could talk about the agent's state of mind and everything like that. But that's why I do say that if there's one thing similar to that and the Jerome Powell story, it's that the brazenness of
Mm.
what the government tries to get folks to believe. With Renee Good, it's don't believe your lying eyes. And in the case of Jerome Powell, uh, you know, assume for a second there's a legitimate basis for this and forget that we tried uh, to bring an investigation against Lisa Cook, that there are so many parallels between what's going on with Jerome Powell and this, including the people involved in the criminal investigation there behind the scenes, and what happened with James Comey and Letitia James. That there's the it's the brazenness of misinformation, lies, and the what the government is asking people to believe.
Well, speaking of brazenness, talk to me about the case against Nicolas Maduro, the legal case. I mean, there's been a lot about that. I saw Jeffrey Toobin writing in the New York Times that he thinks the judge is too old, and that the Constitution needs to be changed, that judges should age out. So tell me about this, because there's been a lot written about, the debatable strength of the legal argument against Maduro. I mean, after all, we went in and got him, because for the Justice Department. I mean, ostensibly. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I read Jeffrey Toobin's article, and it's well argued, and he had a sources before the judge. Judge Hellerstein is a 92-year-old judge. I'll just speak to, without commenting on his editorial. I'll speak to my reporting on him, having covered his cases. Yes, he's 92 years old, and a stalwart and a kind of lion when it comes to restraining government overreach. He was the judge who handled the Alien Enemies Act case last year that was in the Southern District of New York, when, after the Supreme Court changed the procedure of the cases of what to do after the Department of Homeland Security whisked more than 200 men, mostly from Venezuela, out of the country to CCOT, where they were tortured. The Supreme Court mandated a process that all these habeas cases were brought across the country. The one that went to New York got before Judge Hellerstein, who delivered a really scathing ruling against the government, calling it essentially a betrayal of America's ideals with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and saying that the Alien Enemies Act invocation, this is the only 3 times in history had it been invoked as this wartime statute, and the government was claiming that this was being used to deter an invasion of Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang, that the gang itself constituted an arm of the Venezuelan regime and was invading the United States. He rejected that flatly. And that's going to be an important issue as
Yes.
this case moves forward. One of Nicolas Maduro's co-defendants is the alleged leader of Tren de Aragua. So this is someone who has looked at the government's allegations in this space with a degree of skepticism. He's the same judge, Judge Hellerstein, who had ruled that the government had deprived Michael Cohen of his First Amendment rights by trying to revoke his release and after the onset of COVID, when during the height of the COVID pandemic, when prisons were releasing people, that they were going to send Cohen back to prison because he had written a book. That was Hellerstein. Hellerstein was the same judge who had ordered the release of Abu Ghraib torture photos. So he's a judge with a record of combating government overreach. This is a judge who's going to look at all of the claims skeptically, whether it's against Nicolas Maduro or Maduro's defense arguments as this case moves forward. When one of the things that I learned, I was actually earlier in the month, I was there for Maduro's arraignment. And one of the things that emerged during the arraignment was that the defense wants to challenge the legality of the raid. And what you're going to hear going forward a lot about is about a Panamanian strongman, Manuel Noriega, and that back then, Noriega was captured in a very similar raid. But I expect an argument that's going to be made in this case is that Noriega was captured after the Panamanian government, controlled by Noriega, the Panamanian legislature, had declared war on the United States. So I think we're going to hear a lot of argument is this the world we live in now, where if the government has a warrant, it could capture anyone or everyone around the globe, head of state or anyone else, through in a supposed law enforcement operation backed by the military. But if he rules that this case goes to trial, and he said Judge Hellerstein, said that he sees his job as giving Maduro a fair trial, and if this case goes to trial, what we'll see is a lot of information that could potentially embarrass both the Venezuelan regime and Trump's government. I mean, this is where everything about the raid and leading up to the raid is going to come out during trial. I think people will have questions if evidence emerges at trial that of all of the participation by the Venezuelan government in this drug trafficking conspiracy, there might be questions about why did we go through this raid and leave Darcy Rodriguez as the number 2 crony at the head of the government. So I think that once things go into the realm of the courtroom, especially in the courtroom steered by a judge as skeptical, critical, and frankly brave as Hellerstein, things don't go the way anyone expects pretty often. I mean, we'll talk about leaving aside verdict, leaving aside anything like that. The skeletons come out of the closet. There is discovery. There is the admission of evidence in an adversarial system where people get to litigate everything that happened. For example, I expect, just because I heard it in court during arraignment, you had Maduro's lawyers describing the raid on Maduro as an abduction. That and how often do you hear that language used in just the normal, turn on cable and discuss this? This is going to be the uncensored litigating of everything that happened, what to call it. Said he described himself as a kidnapped president. We're going to see if we have a trial, all of the secrets of his government and of the planning, perhaps, if we get to an evidentiary hearing on the matter of the raid, that went into all of this. So I think that there's a lot to be learned from this trial, whatever its outcome. The U.S. government has, under Trump, has not dropped its ambition to use the Alien Enemies Act to round up Venezuelan immigrants in the name of fighting Tren de Aragua. What's the nature of the relationship with Tren de Aragua? The intelligence community, we know from public reporting was very skeptical of the supposed link between Tren de Aragua and the Venezuelan regime. And so, what actually exists there? That's what can come out at a trial. And I think that that's is what makes this a must watch for people who care about democracy around the world, whether in the United States or in Venezuela, because this is something where uh, everything that concerns Trump's immigration policy is going to come to a head in this trial, or quite a lot that concerns his immigration policy, and quite a lot that concerns the allegations of the indictment. So I'm definitely going to be watching that one closely, and we're already seeing the path that it can go as we're already in just the opening stages.
And so what else do we have that's on the docket? I know we have the Alexander brothers, the two real estate brothers from Miami who were accused of all sorts of horrible rape and sex crimes. The reason I know about that is because Luigi Mangione's defense lawyer, Mark Anifilo, Karen Anifilo's husband, and they work together. He is, I think he must be in trial for that case this month. He's a busy man. In the middle of the state evidentiary hearings, he flew to Malaysia and back to represent, I think it's called Roger Ng, financier over there. So anyway, a very, very busy defense lawyer. Same guy who did Diddy's defense. I was almost surprised that he wasn't doing Maduro's. Anyway.
Right. I mean, that's a major sex trafficking trial that's coming up in the Southern District of New York. There's going to be more litigation around the Epstein files in the Southern District of New York. I see a couple of people have mentioned that. That hasn't gone anywhere, and that is continuing to proceed in that same courtroom, and partly because that's where you have that supposed investigation when Trump said essentially investigate people on the Democratic side of the aisle, and Pamela Bondi, without, said, "Sir, yes, sir," without saying, well, no, we're going to do this without fear and favor. No. When Trump demands investigate some Democrats, she assigns it to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, who accepted the assignment without a peep. And he's the one who initiated the process to unseal grand jury records. And remember that December 19th deadline for the release of all of the Epstein files? Well, that Jay Clayton revealed in a recent filing in one of those cases to release the grand jury minutes, which aren't supposed to contain anything new according to the judges who reviewed them privately. Jay Clayton privately admitted, about 1% of them have been released. So I expect we'll be hearing more about that as that docket proceeds. It's important to note that one of the things that was released among the trove was that grand jury record in the Epstein case, entirely redacted. This is the grand jury record that the government supposedly fought to unseal, which kind of shows the gamification that's going through all of it.
We haven't actually talked since all of that mayhem, because it happened right after I think you and I last spoke. I mean, it was unfathomable to me that, how does it happen that the Southern District just didn't coordinate with with Pam Bondi on this? I mean, how is that even possible that the Southern District goes whoops?
Right. I don't believe it for a second. I've seen, whenever we see Jay Clayton file something, and some really great questions in the live chat, keep them coming. Um, Jay Clayton is usually signing them not with any of his assistants, not with any of the line prosecutors who actually prosecuted Epstein and
Right.
Maxwell. He's signing it with Bondi and Blanche. Everything that in his entire behavior on this entire matter suggests he's been working hand in glove with Maine Justice and not with his line prosecutors. It's why the uh, the why members of Congress have gone to the Southern District of New York asking for an alternative way for these files to be released, to the point that someone mentioned earlier. Yes, that's a live controversy, and it's a live controversy happening in the Southern District of New York. It's where we could finally see movement on that. This is somewhat before I forget to respond to it. It's unrelated, but I do want to answer this question. Someone, Colleen Cummins asked, when is Lindsay Halligan's response to Judge Novak's inquiry? That is coming up very soon. That is coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow is her deadline to respond to a federal judge's demand, a judge who was appointed by Donald Trump, that she provide an explanation as to why she keeps describing herself as a U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia,
Yeah.
when a court found that she is no such thing. And she must include in her response whether her continuing to identify herself falsely as a U.S. attorney amounts to professional misconduct. That is due tomorrow. That is coming to a head very soon. And the New York Times and MSNBC are reporting today that her top deputy, the so-called first assistant U.S. attorney, which is a false title because she is not a U.S. attorney,
Yeah.
has been ousted. He's been fired because, I think everyone watching can guess he
Yeah.
wasn't going along with bringing back the Comey case. He thought he couldn't have that position, the first assistant U.S. attorney, and lead the case, according to the sources who were speaking to the New York Times and were speaking to to MS Now. And they both gave the same account to both publications. There was another concern where one of the sources had apparently said that they thought that this person, Robert McBride, was a sort of lobbying to take over the job as U.S. attorney by speaking to federal judges in that district. That was a perception by Trump's DOJ that they were undermining Halligan and the administration.
And,
Um, and, who knows to what extent that is the government's paranoia and perception, or that was going on. But the bottom line and the headline from both of those stories is that another person said no to the Comey prosecution and lost his job, a running theme in the Eastern District of New York. And as a result, Comey and Letitia James remain free, and their cases remain dismissed as the government tries desperately and keeps failing to find anyone, to go along with a case that they can run by a grand jury.
God, Adams.
Mm.
Well, it's a sad roundup, isn't it?
It is.
For whatever we're in, the second week of the year, third week of the year. I mean, it's like,
it's a grim start to the new year, but
it is.
It's a grim start that does point to the power of, and this is, I hammer this point whenever I get the chance, because it really is um when I went independent, All Rise News, what it's all about is the whole idea that we aren't powerless, and that the biggest gains that Trump has had in his second term has been from people who didn't fight back. And Comey fought back. Letitia James fought back. Jerome Powell released that blistering statement, which is how, to a large extent, we know about this probe. Just think of what would happen if Jerome Powell, Lisa Cook said, I can't take this. They're
Right.
opening a criminal investigation. I don't believe in Federal Reserve independence that much. I've worked long and hard my entire life. I'm just going to retire. To hell with everything. We would have joined the nations of the world where the strongman ruler has his mitts on the central bank. We would join the company of Russia. We would join the company of Turkey, I believe, has had that very issue. The countries, someone listed the countries where the head of state got its mitts on the central bank, and it's not a very distinguished list. And the reason why it did not happen yet is because people are fighting back. And the reason that all of these outrageous, just nakedly retribution prosecutions, payback prosecutions fall apart is because those folks have fought back. And so it's a grim new year, absolutely. But I do think that it's important to pay very close attention to the legal process on that, because it really does show that the power of asserting one's rights, of getting in the streets, of of
Yeah.
participating in civic engagement, that has led to very real results. One of the things we talked about uh, how wrenching all of the, and we were saturated with the videos from very different angles of a 37-year-old mother of three getting shot in the head 3 times, 2 of those shots from the side of her car. And in the wake of that, it's astonishing how many videos I've seen of people getting approached by a federal agent who's openly threatening them, and either smiling at them and defiant, cheerfully defiant. I've seen, just there are so many of those videos swirling around right now, and that atmosphere of asserting one's rights cheerfully under extraordinary circumstances is the story so far, I think, of Trump 2.0. That has been going on in a mass scale, and it hasn't been going on with media conglomerate executives very much. It hasn't been going on a lot with the some of the big law uh,
Yeah.
firms,
Yeah.
but it has happened in both small and large ways. It has happened from Jerome Powell, who has somehow
Yeah.
a very staid, conservative.
Not a man who speaks. Yes. Yes.
Right, I mean, not
Yeah.
not not a rabble rouser, not a hothead, who's now being
Yeah.
celebrated, by so many people who probably didn't look too closely at the Federal Reserve before, because there's something that is admirable to have grace under pressure, and to state one's principles calmly, and firmly under those circumstances. Uh, I think that that's been the story of Trump 2.0, and it's held things together I don't get me wrong. There's an extraordinary amount of damage to our institutions, to our position on the world stage. Some of that might be generational, but we are also seeing, just imagine where it would have been without that pushback, without 5 in Trump installed loyalists in U.S. attorneys' offices getting disqualified because people pushed back on that and said, "You're in that office illegally. I'm going to fight that." And that the judges who are rendering those rulings, and often getting doxxed and threatened and sent death threats, if they let that affect them and didn't do their jobs, we could be in a far darker place than we are right now, even in an extraordinarily grim start to a new year.
Well said, Adam Klasfeld. Thank you, my friend, for doing this. I've no doubt with all the things that are going to happen, more Epstein stuff, more Mangione stuff, more everything, we'll be back. But
Absolutely.
thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
And for folks, if you came in late, just a kind of reminder to make sure to subscribe so you can see the full video. We've been speaking for nearly an hour right now, actually, exactly an hour. So to catch what you missed, make sure that you subscribe to both to Vicky Ward Investigates and All Rise News, which is my Substack.
Awesome. Bye.